She was 12 years old. She thought telling the truth would save her. Instead, it erased her. Within 24 hours of asking for help, Maureen Sullivan stood in front of a tall grey building. The walls were high. Broken glass covered the top. The gates were locked from the outside. Inside those walls, girls stopped being girls. They stopped being daughters. They stopped having names. For some of them, those gates never opened again. This was not the Middle Ages. This was not a war zone. This was Ireland. And it happened in the modern world. Stay with us till the end for valuable insights. Like, subscribe, and share to support the channel. Maureen Sullivan was 12 years old when she learned a hard truth about the world. She had been hurt in her own home for months. A man she should have been safe from had been hurting her. She was scared. She felt confused. But finally, she did what adults tell children to do. She told a teacher. She thought someone would protect her. She thought someone would believe her. She thought she would be rescued. Instead, she was sent away. The next day, a car stopped in front of a large stone building. It did not look like a school. It did not look like a hospital. It looked cold. Grey walls, tall windows, heavy doors that made a deep sound when they closed. Maureen stood outside holding a small bag of clothes. The gates opened. They closed behind her. No one explained anything. Inside, women in long black habits waited. Their faces were calm. Their voices were quiet. But there was no warmth in their eyes. They took her bag. They took her clothes. They told her to undress. They gave her a grey uniform. The fabric felt rough against her skin. Then they sat her down in a wooden chair. One of them took scissors. Maureen watched her hair fall to the floor. Long pieces. Then shorter pieces. Then nothing. Her hair was gone. She reached up to touch her head. It felt strange. Light. Wrong. Then they told her something that felt even worse. You will not use your name here. Maureen looked at them. She did not understand. My name is Maureen, she said quietly. One of the nuns shook her head. No. That was all. No explanation. No reason. Just no. She tried one more question. When can I go home? No one answered. The silence felt heavy, like a wall. That night, Maureen lay in a room filled with beds. So many beds. So close together. She could hear other girls breathing. Some were crying softly. Some stared at the ceiling without moving. The lights went out early. There were no clocks, no mirrors, no calendars. She did not know what day it was. She did not know how long she would stay. She did not know that some of the women in that room had been there for 20 years. Or 30. Or more. The next morning, a loud bell rang before the sun came up. 5 minutes. That was all they were given. 5 minutes to stand up. 5 minutes to dress. 5 minutes to make the bed perfectly flat. Then they walked in silence to a chapel. But they did not sit with the rest of society. They sat behind wooden screens. Hidden. Like something shameful. Like something dirty. After Mass, the real work began. The laundry room was large and hot. Steam filled the air. Machines made loud sounds. The smell of soap burned the nose. Maureen was 12 years old. She had never worked in her life. Now she was given a brush and a pile of dirty sheets. Scrub. That was the instruction. She scrubbed until her arms hurt. She scrubbed until her fingers turned red. She scrubbed for hours. 12 hours. Sometimes 14. There was no pay. There were no breaks except short moments to eat. There was one rule above all others. Silence. No talking. No whispering. No asking questions. If she spoke, she would be punished. If she cried too loudly, she would be punished. If she tried to comfort another girl, she would be punished. Maureen realized something slowly, like cold water filling her chest. She had not been sent there for protection. She had been sent there to disappear. The hardest part was not the work. It was the silence. The laundry room never truly slept. The machines hissed and roared like angry animals. Steam covered the windows. Water dripped from pipes. Heavy metal presses slammed down again and again. But the women were not allowed to speak. Not even a whisper. If Maureen looked at the girl next to her and tried to smile, a nun would notice. If someone dropped a sheet and said sorry, punishment followed. The silence was not just a rule. It was a weapon. At first, Maureen tried to count the days in her head. She marked them quietly in her mind. 1 day, 2 days, 7 days, 14. But without a calendar, without a clock, without any change in routine, the days began to blur together. Morning bell. Mass behind the wooden screen. Laundry. Steam. Scrubbing. Folding. Dinner in silence. Sleep. Then again. And again. And again. The sheets they washed did not belong to them. They came from hotels. From hospitals. From government offices. From military bases. Clean white sheets used by people who would never know who washed them. Maureen sometimes imagined the people who slept on those sheets. Did they know? Did they care? She doubted it. Her hands changed quickly. The soap was strong. It cracked her skin. Small cuts opened on her fingers. The water burned those cuts every day. Her back hurt constantly. She was 12, but her body felt old. If she slowed down, a nun would appear. They did not shout often. They watched. Watching was worse. Their eyes followed every movement. If Maureen missed a stain, she had to scrub it again. If she did not move fast enough, she stayed longer. 14 hours sometimes. 14 hours for a child. One afternoon, she heard a sound that did not belong. A whisper. It came from the other end of the room. A girl had leaned too close to another and said something small. Maybe just a name. Maybe just, "Are you okay?" The machines stopped. Not because of the whisper, but because the nuns stopped them. The entire room became still. The girl who whispered was taken away. Maureen did not see her again for 2 days. When she returned, her hair had been cut even shorter. Her face was pale. Her eyes did not look up. After that, no one whispered again. Silence became normal. Too normal. Some women had been there for years. Maureen noticed something strange about them. They did not speak even when they were allowed to. Sometimes, during rare moments outside the workroom, a nun would ask a question. "What is your number?" The woman would answer softly. But when given a chance to say more, she stayed quiet. It was like the words had left her body, like language itself had faded away. Maureen began to fear something more than punishment. She feared forgetting how her own voice sounded. At night, lying in the narrow bed, she would move her lips without making sound. She would say her name silently. Maureen, Maureen, Maureen. She repeated it in her head so she would not lose it, because during the day, they called her something else. A number, a replacement, never her real name. One night, she turned slightly and looked at the older woman in the bed next to her. The woman had gray hair and tired eyes. Maureen waited until the room was completely dark. Then she risked it. In the softest breath, almost no sound at all, she asked, "How long have you been here?" The woman did not answer with words. She slowly lifted her hands. 10 fingers. Then again. And again. 4 times. 40 years. Maureen felt something inside her chest break. 40 years. The woman had entered as a girl. Now she was old. Still there, still washing, still silent. Maureen understood something that night. There was no release date, no sentence, no end written down anywhere. You could enter at 12 and leave only when you died. The next morning, the bell rang again before sunrise. Mass behind the screen. Laundry, steam, silence. But something inside Maureen had changed. She was no longer waiting for someone to rescue her. She was trying to survive. Work was not the only thing inside those walls. There were punishments. Some were small, some were cruel, some were meant to break something deep inside a person. One afternoon, a girl named Marina dropped a cup. It slipped from her tired hands and hit the floor. The sound was sharp. It echoed in the dining hall. Everyone froze. The cup had only been a cup, but inside those walls, even a small mistake became a crime. The nun in charge did not shout. She did not raise her hand. She simply walked to a drawer. She opened it slowly. From inside, she took a thick piece of string. She walked back to Marina. The room was silent. Every girl watched but kept her head down. The nun wrapped the string around Marina's neck. Not tight enough to choke her. Not tight enough to leave marks. Just tight enough so she would feel it every second. Every breath. Every swallow. Every movement. For 3 days, the nun said calmly. Marina wore that string for 3 days and 3 nights. She slept with it. She worked with it. She prayed with it. And at every meal, she was told to get on her hands and knees. She crawled to her plate. She ate from the floor. The other women sat still. They were not allowed to help her. They were not allowed to look at her for too long. After each meal, Marina had to say the same words out loud. I beg Almighty God's pardon, Our Lady's pardon, and my companion's pardon, for the bad example I have shown. All of this for dropping a cup. But sometimes the punishments were worse. One winter night, Marina and 2 other girls broke a rule. No one remembers what the rule was. It did not matter. The nuns decided to make an example of them. They opened a door that led to a glass balcony. It was dark outside. The air was freezing. The girls were pushed out. No coats, no shoes, no blankets. The door locked behind them. They stood there in the cold night. The glass floor was icy under their feet. The wind cut through their thin uniforms. They held each other for warmth. Their teeth shook. Their fingers went numb. Hours passed. Then one full night. Then another. 2 nights outside in winter. By the second morning, Marina's lips were cracked and bleeding. Her fingers had turned blue. She felt dizzy. She thought she might die. When the door finally opened, no one said sorry. No one explained. A nun simply looked at her and said, "Get back to work." There was no comfort, no kindness, just work. Another girl, Kathleen, suffered in different ways. The nuns gave her names that were not her own. They called her Satan. They called her Red Boy. They called her Number 5. Why Number 5? Because her mother had once been locked in another church institution and was known only by a number. The shame passed from mother to daughter. Not a family name. A number. When Kathleen was slow or made a mistake, the nuns hit her head with a heavy ring of keys. Metal against bone. Again and again. She once sat on a cold metal toilet for so long as punishment that her skin stuck to it. When she tried to stand up, it tore. She cried silently. She learned not to scream, because screaming brought more punishment. Some girls tried to run away. They climbed the walls. They ran through the streets of Ireland. They knocked on doors. They begged strangers for help, but the police brought them back. Every time, no one asked questions. No one investigated. The gates opened. the gates closed, and the punishment became worse. Sometimes their heads were shaved completely, hair falling to the floor again. The last small piece of identity taken away. Inside those walls, pain was called discipline, cruelty was called correction, and fear was used like a tool. Maureen watched all of this. She learned quickly. Do not speak. Do not drop anything. Do not look angry. Do not cry loudly. Do not hope too much, because hope could be taken away too. Time inside the laundry did not move like normal time. There were no birthdays, no celebrations, no holidays. Christmas felt like any other day. Morning bell, mass behind the wooden screen, laundry, steam, silence. Maureen stopped trying to count the weeks. The seasons changed outside, but inside everything stayed the same. Some girls arrived crying and afraid. Others arrived quiet, already broken. Many were teenagers. Some were younger. Some had been sent there because they were pregnant and unmarried. Some were orphans. Some had been hurt by men and then blamed for it. Some were sent there simply because someone said they were trouble. But once you entered, the reason did not matter anymore. Inside those walls, everyone carried the same shame, and many never left. Maureen began to notice something strange. Some of the women were very old. Not just older, old. Their hands were thin and covered in lines. Their backs were bent from years of scrubbing. Their eyes looked empty, like they were looking at something far away that no one else could see. One evening, after work, Maureen stood in line for dinner. In front of her was a woman with white hair. Her hands were shaking slightly as she held her plate. Maureen remembered the woman who had shown 40 years with her fingers. She began to understand. These women had entered as girls. Just like her, they had stayed. For decades. Some of them had no family left. Some had no home to return to. Some had forgotten what the outside world looked like. And some would never see it again. When a woman died inside the laundry, there was no funeral with family. No flowers from loved ones. No tears from parents or children. The nuns handled everything. Quietly, quickly. A body disappeared. The bed was empty for one night. The next day, a new girl filled it. The work never stopped. Maureen once saw two men carrying a simple wooden box across the courtyard. No one spoke. No one paused. The machines kept running. The steam kept rising. Life and death inside those walls felt the same. Hidden. Unimportant. Outside the building, Ireland was changing. New music played on radios. Television became more common. People talked about modern times. But inside the laundry, it felt like the past never ended. The women sat behind wooden screens at mass so no one could see their faces. Like they were something to hide. Like they were unworthy of being seen by normal people. That word followed them everywhere. Normal. They were not normal. They were not pure. They were not good enough. That is what they were told again and again. And when you hear something every day, you start to believe it. That was the most dangerous part. Not the beatings. Not the cold nights. Not even the long hours. It was the slow belief that maybe you deserved it. Maureen fought that feeling inside herself. At night, when she lay awake, she tried to remember her home. The sound of her street. The way sunlight looked through a window. The feeling of being called by her real name. She held those memories tightly, because she saw what happened to women who let go. Their eyes changed. They stopped reacting. They moved like shadows. Alive, but not fully living. Years later, researchers would count the names of women who died inside these places across Ireland. The numbers were shocking. Hundreds at one location. Hundreds at another. Many buried in unmarked graves. Some had stayed for 11 years. some for 20, some for 70. 70 years washing other people's sheets. 70 years of silence. Maureen realized something terrible. If she did not leave, this building could become her whole life. She had entered at 12. She could grow old here. She could die here. And the world might never know her real name. That fear kept a small fire alive inside her. A quiet refusal to disappear. For many years, the world outside pretended not to see. People walked past the tall grey buildings every day. They heard the machines. They saw the smoke from the laundry chimneys. They knew women lived inside, but they did not ask questions. The system felt normal. Church and state stood together. Priests had power. Nuns had authority. And the women behind the walls had no voice. Years passed. Then decades. Some laundries closed quietly. Others stayed open longer than anyone expected. The last one did not close until 1996. 1996. The modern world had already arrived. The internet was growing. Movies were being filmed about grand ships and future dreams. But inside one last building in Dublin, women were still washing sheets in silence. Still being watched. Still being told they were not worthy. And then something happened that no one planned. In 1993, one religious order needed money. They decided to sell part of their land in Dublin. Before they could sell it, they had to move the bodies buried on the property. They asked for permission to dig up 133 bodies. That was how many death certificates they could find. Workers began digging. The ground opened, but they did not find 133 bodies. They found 155, 22 more than anyone had recorded. No names, no paperwork, no explanation. The number was wrong, and that mistake changed everything. Later investigations showed that even 155 was not the real number. More than 300 women had died at that single location. Many had never been officially recorded. Many had never been counted. For years, these women had lived in silence. Now even their deaths had been hidden. When the bodies were removed, something else shocked people. Some of the remains still had broken bones wrapped in old plaster casts. Arms, wrists, ankles, ribs. Official reports had once said these injuries were accidents. Falls, clumsy mistakes. Always accidents. Always the woman's fault. But when the truth began to come out, survivors started to speak. Slowly at first, then louder. Women who had stayed silent for 50 or 60 years finally told their stories. They spoke about the long hours, the beatings, the shaved heads, the crawling on cold floors, the endless shame. They spoke about being hidden from government inspectors, about being pushed into tunnels when officials visited, about being treated like free labor, not workers, not humans, labor. And something else made people angry. When those 155 bodies were taken from the ground, the remains were burned. The ashes were mixed together and placed in one single grave, one hole, one marker, as if their individual lives did not matter, as if even in death they were not allowed their own space. People across Ireland began to ask questions. How could this happen? How could it last so long? How could so many people know and say nothing? The truth was painful. The government had sent women there. Courts had ordered it. Police had returned escapees. The state had used their labor. The whole system had worked together. In 2013, the Irish Prime Minister stood before Parliament and apologized. He admitted the state had failed these women. He admitted they had been treated unfairly. He said the country was sorry. A fund was created to give money to survivors. By 2022, more than 800 women had received payments. But the religious orders who had run the laundries did not pay. Not €1. They expressed regret. They said it was part of the culture of the time. They said they were sorry it had to exist. But they kept their property. They kept their wealth. And many survivors felt that words were not enough. Maureen Sullivan watched the apology on television. She was no longer 12. She was a grown woman. But the memories never left her. The steam, the silence, the string around Marina's neck. The 40 years shown with 10 fingers. She had survived. But survival did not mean healing. Still, something had changed. The ground had opened. The truth had come out. And the world could no longer pretend it did not know. Maureen Sullivan walked out of the laundry at 16. 4 years had passed. 4 years of steam. 4 years of silence. 4 years without hearing her real name spoken with kindness. When the gates finally opened for her, the outside world felt too bright, too loud, too free. Cars moved quickly on the street. People laughed. Children ran past her without fear. It all felt strange. She should have felt joy. Instead, she felt empty. Because when someone takes your childhood, they do not give it back when you leave. They do not return the birthdays. They do not return the lost school days. They do not return the nights spent crying into a thin pillow. Maureen tried to build a normal life. She worked. She met people. She smiled when she was expected to smile. But inside her mind, the laundry never truly closed. She could still hear the machines. She could still feel the sting of soap in small cuts on her fingers. She could still see the wooden screens that hid her from society, as if she was something shameful. For many survivors, silence followed them home. Some never told their husbands. Some never told their children. Some carried the secret for 60 years. The shame had been planted so deep that even freedom could not remove it. But Maureen made a different choice. She decided she would not stay silent. She began searching for other women who had been inside. It was not easy. Many were afraid. Many did not want to reopen old wounds. But slowly, voices began to join. One woman told her story, then another, then another. Each story sounded different, but the pain was the same. Lost youth, forced labor, punishment for things they never did, being called dirty, being told they were less than human. Maureen listened. She wrote things down. She spoke publicly. She pushed for investigations. She demanded answers. She wanted the country to admit what had happened. Not quietly, not in whispers, out loud. She said something simple but powerful. I do not believe in unmarked graves for survivors. We were treated like nobodies. I will not let us be buried like nobodies. Those words carried weight, because for decades, the women of the laundries had been erased. Erased from records, erased from conversations, erased from history books. But now, they stood together. The buildings still stand in parts of Ireland today. Some are empty, windows broken, paint peeling, grass growing through cracked stone. Some have been turned into apartments. Young people live there now. They cook dinner in rooms where women once scrubbed until their hands bled. They sleep peacefully where silence once ruled. History does not always disappear. Sometimes it hides under new paint. More than 30,000 women passed through those laundries over nearly 200 years. 30,000 lives changed. 30,000 stories interrupted. Some stayed months. Some stayed decades. Some entered as children. Some left in coffins. And by the 1950s, 1 out of every 100 people in Ireland was locked inside some kind of religious institution. Think about that. 1 in every 100. That is not a mistake. That is a system. A system that decided certain girls were problems. A system that believed suffering could clean a soul. A system that chose silence over truth. Maureen Sullivan had entered that system at 12. She could have disappeared inside it. She could have become another old woman showing years with her fingers. But she refused. She chose to speak. She chose to remember. She chose to fight. The apology from the government did not erase the pain. The money given to survivors did not return stolen time. No speech can undo a childhood. But truth matters. Memory matters. Names matter. Because when a name is taken away, a person begins to fade. And when that name is spoken again, clearly and proudly, something returns. Maureen, Marina, Kathleen, and thousands more. They were not dirty. They were not dangerous. They were not shameful. They were girls. They were daughters. They were human beings. For years, the walls were high. The glass on top was sharp. The gates were locked tight. But in the end, the truth climbed over those walls. And this time, it did not stay silent.